Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Benefit Specialist video conference. We do have quite a bit on the agenda for you today, so we'll go ahead and get started soon. Just a few quick reminders before we do jump into that. We are on a live recording, so if you have any questions, send them to me via instant message. We'll try to get those answered for you. If it's something that we're unable to answer right in the moment, we'll get those sent out to the entire field after the video conference is done. Also, of course, please make sure you're keeping up on your security trainings. You should be getting those Wombat emails. Make sure that you are keeping up on those. If you have them done, thank you very much for being on top of it. And if not, jump in there. They really don't take very long to do. I think that's all I have for our pre-start announcements. We'll go ahead and get into that agenda. So this morning we have Michelle Rossetti. She's going to be talking about some fraud and recovery processes. We also have Brenda Ilg has joined us today for LEAP and weatherization, which is just the perfect time of year for that. So I'm very excited to have her with us. Jackie Erb is going to be talking about customer service as it pertains to our elderly and disabled households. And then Georgia Auk has some child support frequently asked questions as they relate to power, which hopefully will clear up some confusion that we've had across the state. And then we're going to be doing SNAP expense training and SNAP power and assistance unit comp and epics training. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'll turn it over to you, Michelle. Thanks for joining us.
My mic. There we go. Good morning. First of all, I wanted to explain to everyone, I'm not sure everyone knows, but the Fraud and Recovery Unit is known as the Eligibility Integrity Unit. That actually occurred, I hate to say this, but about a year ago when we became part of the Economic Security Division. So we are slowly changing everything to Eligibility Integrity Unit. It's going to be kind of hard because we've been fraud and recovery for so long that just kind of rolls off my tongue. But if you bear with us, we will all get there. So little by little, Eligibility Integrity Unit is our name right now. So when Val asked me to present, I asked her to reach out to the benefit specialist supervisors to see what do people have questions about? What do they want to know about the Eligibility Integrity Unit? We've had lots of changes in the last year, and who knows, we may be seeing more changes. But I did receive a couple of questions, so I thank you for that. And I'm glad that people are thinking about fraud, eligibility, integrity, and what we do. But one of the questions was, can someone who doesn't have an overpayment be referred for disqualification? Super question, tells me that you're really thinking about the process and could that occur? And the answer is yes, it can happen. There are times when, as an eligibility worker, you discover something that doesn't appear quite right. It might be a new application like a recert. It could be a change report. It could be something that they call to report, submit some document, and you go, something's not quite right. So you do a little bit of investigation and you discover that things weren't quite right as reported, and you make the changes to the system. And so you kind of catch it before an overpayment occurs. So I'm sure if you think back on some of your cases and some of the information that was submitted to you, that might have happened. So you ultimately learn that something different happened and you make the appropriate change. Now, one more thing you can think about is, was there intent? Was there some type of intent to either deceive the agency because there was a lack of information, or was there incorrect information that was submitted to the department? So you can send that file in, and you can ask us to take a look at that and see if we can prove intent, because that's what we have to do. We have to prove to the hearing officer that someone had intent to deceive DFS when the application was submitted, or that change report, or whatever that information was that was submitted. If you think that there was intent to deceive, we can take a look at that as well. And so we also have to weigh in on whether or not that information or lack of information was submitted on purpose. Was there intent to deceive behind that motive when that information was submitted? And I wanted to just share with you what the regulations say, and some of you that have participated in a disqualification hearing have already heard this a million times, and maybe you've got it memorized, but this is what the regulation says. An intentional program violation shall consist of having intentionally made a false or misleading statement, or misrepresented, concealed, or withheld facts, or committed any act that constitutes a violation of the Food Stamp Act, the SNAP regulations, or any state statute for the purpose of using, presenting, transferring, acquiring, receiving, possessing, or trafficking of EBT benefits. So if we believe that we can prove intent, one of my staff, and sometimes I'll take a case too, will refer the adults in that household for a disqualification hearing. Generally speaking, if there are 2 adults in the household and only one of the adults signed the application, we will only move forward with the individual who signed the application. But anyway, when we are preparing for a disqualification hearing, it's a lot of work. We don't mind doing it. It's part of our job. But my investigators will review the case circumstances, and they will analyze those details once again. And one little detail can make intent go away. So we really do have to analyze the case circumstances and determine whether we believe that we can prove intent. And if we believe that, we will prepare the disclosure statement, and we will prepare the witnesses, and most likely that's going to be one of you. And we're going to call you to testify because you're the one that most likely has firsthand knowledge of what took place. And hopefully that is based on that evidence. Excuse me, I'm getting ahead of myself. One of my staff, generally it is Kathy Dice or Dawn Royal, they will prepare you for your testimony, and it's going to be based on that evidence that's in the case file. And we're going to try to convince the hearing officer that an intentional program violation occurred. And my investigators, they have to be at the top of their game when they're looking at these, because we don't want to lose a hearing. We know that it takes a lot of work, and that's a lot of time and effort. And most of the time, I would say 99% of the time, we win. So that's a good thing for us and a good thing for you guys, because these are taxpayer dollars. If you have any question about whether intent occurred, please give Dawn or Kathy a call, discuss what you're seeing or not seeing, and they will help you determine what the next best step is. So please understand, we can proceed with a disqualification without an overpayment. So as I alluded,
Looks like we are experiencing some technical difficulties here this morning. I'm going to reach out to Michelle and see if we can get her back in. Let's see. Give me just a quick moment. Okay, she is signing out and signing back in, and we'll be able to jump right back into where we lost her. I apologize for this. While we're waiting for Michelle, I did realize that I forgot to mention, if you are on time study, your time study codes are on the agenda. So make sure to print that out and have that available to complete your time study for this training. All right, looks like Michelle is back. Are you there, Michelle? We can't see. There you are.
Where did you lose me?
On the process, once Dawn and Kathy established the fact that we do have an intentional program violation, and that you don't have to have an overpayment to have an intentional program violation.
Okay, I think you probably heard most of what I was talking about. I'm trying to remember where I brought them in. Did I talk about the whole disqual process at all?
We lost you just a few minutes before I sent you the instant message.
Well, I hate to repeat what I already said. Did we hear about the definition of a program violation?
We did.
I think I was probably about at the end, and basically, yeah, if we tend to catch that information that was presented that was false or misleading, or it concealed some type of fact, then benefits were issued appropriately. Caught the information. So there's not an overpayment, but there could be intent to deceive. Most of the time, we find out about the bad behavior after benefits were issued. But I would say, probably less than 5 times a year, we proceed with a disqualification where there's not an overpayment because we either stopped benefits from being issued at all, or we made the appropriate change based on the better information that we received after we, and I say we, I mean the benefit specialist discovered that the information was not correct initially. So I will just move on, and if we have more questions, please reach out to myself or Kathy or Dawn. They are my investigators who are really focusing on the final part of an investigation and also moving forward with disqualification hearings. So the other question that was presented to me was, could the Eligibility Integrity Unit have a way to recoup overpayments through WyoLotto? That's a great idea. That's another great question, but unfortunately, no. That would require a statutory change. I believe child support is able to do that now. Our best remedy of an involuntary payment on an overpayment is through the TOP program, which is the Treasury Offset Program. And we love the tax season because that's when individuals with SNAP overpayments are receiving tax refunds. And if the stars all align correctly, so we have all the processes into place, we are able to recoup through a tax refund a SNAP overpayment. The other idea that I thought I wanted to present today was just to revisit the 709 and the 719. You heard me talk about them last spring, and that was due to a realignment of some of our duties. And if you wanted to refer to those maps that I gave you last spring, it pretty much focuses on 2 of my investigators are doing some pre-investigative work, and 2 of my investigators are doing the final part of an investigation and the disqualification process. My gals that are also doing the pre-investigative work also do the collection and the monitoring of our recovery cases. But when I talked to you last spring, we had this new process in place, and we talked about the 709 and we talked about the 719. The 709 talks about referrals for overpayments, and the 719 talks about referrals for investigation. Well, when I talked to you last spring, it was a whole new process, and we really tried to focus in on the good stuff, on the good investigations. But it seems like our numbers have dropped since then. So I'm thinking there must be a little bit of confusion over when it's okay to send it in, when it's not okay to send it in. And I just wanted to talk about that a little bit more today. So the DFS 709 is your referral for overpayment. When you are looking at both of these situations, overpayment, investigation, which one is which? It's a different mindset than I think you're normally used to, because it's my impression that you are always looking in the future based on, some current circumstances. You are projecting what benefit amounts will be issued to someone who has been making an application for public assistance benefits. But when you're looking at overpayments or investigations, you're looking in the past. And that, I think that is a normal perspective for you. And, sometimes it's confusing about which form to fill out. So please reach out to any of my staff to try to determine which is the best form to use. So if we take a look at the DFS 709, that's your referral for overpayment. There are about 3 situations that you're going to submit a 709. The first one that comes to my mind is we didn't calculate benefits correctly. So household received too many. That's going to happen. We're all human, and we can't work a perfect caseload. And my best guess is that I will be receiving, or my unit will be receiving, a couple cases from each of you every year. It's just going to happen. Then there's another instance where a client really didn't have any intent to deceive the agency. We all know that our clients can be under stress from time to time, and we call those inadvertent household errors. And, that's going to happen too. So those types of cases should be sent in as well. And the third thing is kind of what we just alluded to a little bit ago, is that there really was intent to deceive. And those cases are considered, or can be considered, fraud once an IPV decision has been rendered. And, you got to send in those cases as well. These forms don't need anyone else's approval other than your supervisor. So, please continue to send those in. And in the future, we will be having more discussion about what's appropriate when the document imaging system is in place. Our processes are going to change with that, but I think for the better. And then the other form is your referral for investigation. These documents, or this document, needs a lot of detail. And it's going to help us because you know that case. You have firsthand knowledge, and we're taking a look at it, and it's all paper to us. So it's going to help if you give us as much detail as you can. But first, before you fill it out, I still want to ask you to call Kathy, Kathy Dice or Don Royal, and that depends on where you're at in the state. If you need a map, I'm happy to send that out to you. But those were shared last year. The territory has not changed. Excuse me, that was last spring. And the new staff that have come on board since then, I've been sharing that with the new orientations. So please refer to those from time to time. I think it'd be really, really helpful if you did that. So on the DFS 719, think about, who are we referring? Who has not been reporting their household circumstances as they should? And include any other individuals that may be involved. And if you would please give us first names and last names, that's really helpful. If it's a boyfriend named John, what's John's last name? That's super helpful for us. And then tell us what's not being done, or what is being done that you feel is not appropriate. Again, tell us what's not making sense to you. And also include why. Are you referring John Doe because he's the father of one of the children in the household? That's helpful too, so that we're not trying to determine, why is this guy important. The more information you can give us on that 719, the easier and more streamlined it will be. Again, we're looking at this having not looked at it yet, and you know your case. So then lastly, and I hate to bring this up, but I just want to touch on it briefly. When you complete the 719 and the 709, please just keep it to the facts. We've received a few referrals from time to time that indicate that this person is a liar and a cheater, and they're just trying to work the system so that they can get benefits that they're not entitled to receive. Please don't put that in there, because here's why. Those documents at some point could become a part of a disqualification hearing case, or, you know, if the situation is really egregious, it could be part of a prosecution case. And we that professional and just stick to the facts. The facts, that they can't change themselves. The facts are the facts. I think that's about all I have for today. If there's anything else that you would like to hear about in the future, please reach out. We're always happy to talk about our issues that we see, and I'd love to share anything that we can. So with that, I will call it good, Val, unless you've got a instant message that's come through with a question. I'd be happy to take those as well.
I have not received any as of yet. If anyone does have any questions, if anything comes up even after the broadcast is done, send those to me and I will get those questions to Michelle and we will have those answers out to you. All right. Great. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thanks, everyone. No worries.
All right. So I'll go ahead and turn this over. Next, we have Brenda Ilg to talk about LEAP and weatherization. Thank you for joining us, Brenda.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. And I'm going to see if I can make this screen share work.
We can see it.
Okay. Well, we got past the first hurdle, so we'll just blaze right through, and I am going to go through some of the slides fairly quickly. I included them because I thought they may be helpful as a reference for some of you as you do your jobs throughout each and every day. So having said that, I am just going to start off with the Low-Income Energy Assistance Program, LEAP. That's probably the one everyone is most familiar with. And we are accepting applications. LEAP is open, off, and running. We've been accepting applications since about August. The earlier we get them in the door, the better for LEAP, because as you know, we are squished into about a 5 to 7 month period where, well, actually about a 5-month period where we actually need to get those applications in the door and get them processed and the benefits out to the recipients. So we really have to streamline and move very quickly with all of that. So our season begins October 1. I think everybody is familiar with that. I put the 800 number there. I think that's probably also something that everyone is very familiar with at this point. One thing that I do want to point out is that this year we created a special email designated for the use of DFS staff only. So if you have a client come in and bring their LEAP application or some supporting documents or both for LEAP, or if you yourself have a question about a client's application or situation, or just LEAP in general, you can now use that LEAP DFS at the alignteam.org email address, and we know that all of the questions, the applications coming through DFS offices around the state are in that one email inbox. And so we have staff designated to work that email inbox only. So we've taken them out of the big pipeline, if you will, to try and better assist our field office staff with the applications and questions coming through their offices. So we hope that that helps. Important dates. The crisis season is the one that actually begins October 1st. We also open it up for our deliverable fuel clients, simply because some of them reside on the top of the mountain or way out there. And if that propane truck doesn't get there early October, it may not get there because of the weather. The regular season begins November 1st. The application deadline is February 28th or 29th, depending whether it's a leap year. The crisis request deadline is April 15th. We do have the flexibility that we can extend that crisis season deadline if we have a particularly hard winter or a certain heating fuel price skyrockets in mid-season, something of that nature. We can extend that out if we have the funds and feel that there's a need to do so. The season ends May 31st. That means that we will pay LEAP benefits up through May 31st unless a client has fully exhausted their seasonal benefit. So it's whichever happens first. And this is just this year's income guidelines. I thought that might be helpful. I know a lot of times people call in and that's the question that they have. Will I qualify? Is it worth my time to send in an application? So those are this year's. We do use 60% of the state median household income to set our income guidelines. And those are federally set. And so they're subject to change each year. And this one is important because there are several things that will cause a bottleneck in the whole processing mechanism for LEAP applications. So this is basically a funnel, and that's kind of the way the LEAP season looks, and the application season, if you will. So September and October, we receive 3,000 to 5,000 applications. That's before the season even begins. So we have a backlog from the get-go. And we like to get them early because we can start processing those applications and approving them. We just won't pay out the benefits until the season opens. So we like to get ahead of that 8 ball a little bit. What can cause a big bottleneck in this stage of the game is if we get duplicate applications and documents, and the sheer just upfront volume, and then the short time frame that we have to work all of this. But the duplicate applications and documents really foul us up. So sometimes we get people sending it by fax, and then they'll also scan it and email it, and then they'll also stick it in the mail. Please, 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 please do not do that. Pick one. If it comes by fax or email, our automated system queues it up immediately and will send it down the crisis expedite road or the regular seasonal benefit, no crisis situation road. And so it's much quicker, it's safer, because nobody has to handle that application. It's never printed out. It's not touched by human hands. It goes right into the pipeline. November hits, and we get 3,000 to 4,000 additional applications on top of what we've already gotten. And then we start seeing other things like the incomplete applications we receive from clients. That creates a bottleneck, because then we have several applications that we have to pen and wait for the information to come in before we can continue processing that particular application. IT issues, if they're going to hit, this is about when they start to hit, because the volume starts getting big. And then December, we get another 2,000 to 3,000 applications. December, unless we have a really, really cold, snowy December, or we have a big layoff in one of the bigger industries in Wyoming, it tends to be a little bit of a quieter month for us. So it's a month where we do a lot of catch up typically in getting those applications approved and the benefits out the door. January, again, we're starting to wind down, but we'll see 1,000 to 2,000 more applications coming in the door. And then in February, we kind of have that last surge because we're coming up on the application deadline, and we'll get another 1,000 to 2,000. This is like a normal year. We also have bigger years where all of these numbers are larger at each stage of the game. And so in those last months, we have the unreadable applications. Our new scanning and intelligent data capture system has made that a little bit better, because it can better read a crumpled up, coffee stained, crayon drawn on application or document better than, say, the scanner that I've got sitting next to my desktop. But we still get some that you just can't make them out. And so that creates another bottleneck in the system, because we have to, pen, go back to the client, have them resend it, etc. And then we start, because we're really getting to the end of things and very caught up, where we run into the conflicting information applications, where you start seeing things that just don't add up. And so that can create a bottleneck for that particular applicant if they get things a little mixed up, whether it's intentional or unintentional. Most of the time it's unintentional. We are dealing with a lot of senior citizens, many of whom are going through some dementia and some things like that, or their memory is not what it used to be. And so, and we also have a large group of people with varying degrees of disability, some of those affecting their mental ability and their ability to comprehend and that sort of thing. So this is just, I think, a good image to have in mind in terms of how the LEAPS season and application intake and processing looks just a little bit different than what we normally see. And I skipped over because it was basically just a slide that we have moved to what we call performance management for LEAP, and that's a federal move. And so basically everything at this point in time within the LEAP program is data driven. So we make all of our program and policy decisions now based on data. And I'm going to just quickly show you what some of that data that we capture is at this point in time. We do gather household energy data at this point in time, both consumption and cost for our LEAP households. And this simply shows what the average annual income of, and this was fiscal year 2016 data. So you can see, and we have what we define as high energy burden households. That's the top 25% of our caseload. And they're going to be the ones with the lowest incomes, and we're talking annual incomes, and the highest total residential energy cost. So you can see where our average incomes, and we divide it out by fuel type. So I'm just going to skip past that. These are pieces of information you can look at later. This is the breakout of our total caseload, and you can see how high the elderly and the disabled, and elderly for LEAP is age 60 and older, and then children age 5 and under. These are those groups within the population that are most vulnerable to temperature changes. So we are required to prioritize those folks. And so you can see that we are definitely doing that in Wyoming. And then here is the breakout of that total caseload based on income. And we are required to serve those with the lowest incomes. We are to prioritize them, I would say, and you can see that we are also doing that. The average annual total LEAP benefit, and you can see for the average household, it's about $511. And for those high burden households, $736. One of our federal performance measures is that we should be giving a higher benefit to households with a higher energy burden. And you can see that we are doing that. And it's interesting sometimes to know what the total residential energy bill for the households we serve is. And this breaks it out between the high burden households and your average households. And you can see that when you get to the deliverable fuels, it's much higher. And we believe that that's likely because they are also using a lot of electric space heat in those homes. So their electric bills tend to be much higher. And the fuel itself is a higher cost. And what we want to make sure, one of the big performance measures that we want to achieve in the LEAP program is to make sure that we're reducing those energy burdens for low-income citizens. And this slide just shows that we are doing that across the board. And for the high burden, and just you think back to those average annual incomes for our high burden households, some of them have an annual income of $7,000 to $8,000. And can you imagine 27% of that going to heat your house? That's a big chunk of a very small pot of money. And this I'm not going to go through because I've pretty much went through these bullet points about what the data is actually telling us. And this is just my contact information. If at any time you have questions, don't hesitate to give me a call, a shout out, or an email. And it's got some information about the websites. Where can somebody apply online? We do have online application now where people can actually submit it. They fill it out online and click the submit button, and we have it. And I'm going to quickly go through weatherization. And it's basically to reduce energy costs by increasing the energy efficiency of the homes. And these first ones are just some regular stats. The client applies for services. We do an energy audit, and that gives us a list of cost-effective measures. And then we will, while we're installing those measures, we'll also educate that client about energy efficiency and the performance of their home. Again, we prioritize the same groups. And we have always way more demand and need than funding. So a lot of folks end up on a waiting list for years before we get to them. It's a very, very technical program. Our technicians are highly trained. They have to have many different certifications. And this is just some of what we find out in the field when we go out there. This is always strikes me. One of the things we do find is people are very resourceful with what they have at hand. You saw the Folgers coffee can to replace that segment of stack. Is it safe? No. But did they try to correct that problem themselves? Absolutely. We also address many health and safety issues when we're weatherizing homes. Probably the most common one we run into is carbon monoxide. And this was one that was kind of a surprise to me, how common and frequent we run into. And these are just the severe ones where you go, you need to get out of this home now, and we need to shut this gas off or this appliance. And this is always my image for what desperation looks like. We actually found this in a home because people, when it comes down to trying to stay warm or make their families warm, they will do very, very unsafe things to try and achieve that. And you can see all of the combustible materials around that open flame. A little dog was running circles around it with its tail just bopping around. We thought we were going to see barbecued puppy when we went into that home. So that's what happens when people get their heat shut off, or they can't afford to heat their homes. They'll use whatever they have available to them to try and create heat and keep those pipes from freezing. And with that, I'm going to stop. If there are any questions that have been sent in, I will address those. And again, I am always available if questions come up. I know in this job, just when you think you've maybe seen it all, you haven't. Something else comes up, or somebody else walks in the door and you're like, wow, okay. So that's probably the same with all of you.
Brenda, I thank you for all of that great information. I do not see that I have any instant messages that have come through with questions for you. to the field. Just like with Michelle, if you have any questions that come up even after this broadcast is done, send them to me and I will get them to Brenda. We'll get those answered for you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Now, how do I close him out of there?
Little stop broadcast button, or no, that's mine. There should be a stop screen sharing button for you.
Okay.
There you go.
Did I get it off?
You did.
Okay. Great.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
You too. It's raining here in Worland.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
At least it doesn't snow just yet.
Right.
All right. So that was some great information for LEAP and weatherization. It is that time of year, so make sure that we are making those referrals for clients who are in need of assistance or who may qualify for that program. And you have all the information at your fingertips in order to do so. Next up on the agenda, we have Jackie Erb, and she's going to be discussing customer service with elderly and disabled households.
Hi, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Don't forget to go vote today. That's important. So I'm going to go over a situation that we had come up, give you the actual scenario, and identify what we need to be seeing on these cases going forward. Andy had to be part of a call today, so she asked me to share this with you guys. So we had a situation where a household applied for benefits, and one of the household members was on SSI. The other household member had no income whatsoever. So this household was given a 12-month cert period, and they were explained correctly at their interview that if their household's income went over 130% of the federal poverty level, they needed to report that to the Department of Family Services. We know as eligibility staff that when it comes down to it, because this household has someone who's on SSI, they actually have to meet the net income test. But when we are explaining reporting responsibilities to all of our households, we make them report if they go over 130% of the federal poverty level for the gross income limit. So the person in this household who was not working ended up getting a job, and it would put the household over 130% of the federal poverty level. And they correctly contacted their worker and reported that this had happened, but they also requested that their case just be closed, which the worker did, which was not wrong necessarily, but where we want to see some additional customer service after having a conversation with our federal partners is that if you have a household that has these circumstances, if they call you and say, we're over, the income limit now and we want our case closed, we would like you to explain to them that they still potentially could be eligible and that we need to verify that income, because we will also, they will get the deductions, for their expenses, so they still may qualify. So if you have that situation, please do that going forward. Let them know, hey, if you turn that information in, we'll evaluate and see if you still are eligible. So most likely benefits will decrease, but you still could potentially be eligible. So that in a nutshell is what Andy Barker wanted me to go over with you guys. Are there any questions or comments on that?
I don't have any yet.
Okay, if anyone has any, feel free to reach out to myself, Valerie, Andy, your supervisor, but we'll make sure that everyone's on the up and clear on this. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jackie. All right, moving right along. I'll go ahead and turn this over to Georgia Auk for the Power and Child Support Frequently Asked Questions. Hi, Georgia.
Thank you. So, during the regional policy trainings, there were a lot of child support questions that were asked. And I was not able to answer some of them. Some of them were really good questions that required a little bit of research. So We promised to do a power and child support frequently asked questions document for you. And let me see if I can share that. I'll go over it briefly with you. I won't go over it in great detail, but I'll go over the majority of it with you. Some of these I think you guys already know, but I thought perhaps this could be a great review. You can find child support information regarding power in the combined manual in sections 721 and 722. Basic eligibility. Almost everyone has to cooperate with child support if they're engaging in any kind of a power case, including relative caretakers. And they do have to cooperate with both parents. That also includes a referral for deceased parents. Child support has some special requirements that they have to complete in those cases, as well as for parents who have their parental rights have been terminated. So just some basic eligibility there. The other question I found that we received a lot is, how do we treat child support in the month of application? This answer came specifically from Combined Manual 722. C.5, we basically allow the assistant unit to retain any child support payments they received in the month of application, and we use that support in calculating their power payment. But beginning with the second month, the client must return any child support payments they receive. I also included a couple of screenshots for you that I thought you might find helpful for how and where to input child support information in EPICS in the SPRD and CSEA screens. I think the one that I really got the most questions about was question number 8. And I want to thank our Gillette field team for helping us with this one, because not only did we find an answer, but we also found some preventative strategies to use as well. Their question was, are there any circumstances when child support can be retained? And you know, really, child support is only retained for the children who are included in the grant. That's how it should work. But oftentimes, households and assistant unit composition is complex. You guys know that. So sometimes there are children in the home that are receiving child support, but they're not included in the power grant. And here's an example of a caretaker relative case. Jaden is the daughter of Dina, and Jaden is not included in this caretaker relative case. So Dina is able to retain the child support payments received for Jaden. Child support payments received for the 2 grandchildren, however, cannot be retained. So the resolution that we found on this is, when you have a case that looks like this, just reach out to Denise Dunn. She's the child support program manager. You can either call her or email her and just kind of give her a heads up. Once she has that information, then she can make adjustments to the child support case to avoid any types of confusion and eliminate the payments that should be retained not being received. Obviously, child support has some pretty significant and complex processes that they use to determine what child support should be retained. And I've included a couple of examples there that you can take a look at. Example number 2 is, you know, if child support is received and it's more than the power grant, if this happens on a consistent basis, we may want to consider closing that case for excess income. But in cases where it's inconsistent, this circumstance may apply. And then the third example is child support received for back payments. If they're receiving a back payment child support check and they were not on power at that time, the client is able to retain that payment. So the big question that always comes up is, how do I know when a power client can retain their child support? And my response is, we typically don't know. You need to contact your local child support partner, and they'll be able to help you with that. So let's see, what's the next one. Oh, this one comes up a lot. Child support and the initial IRP. You know, since we changed to that 14-day referral for child support, we've had this question a lot. So I wanted to make sure that I included this one for you. How do I handle a power application and child support received, or child support if the application was received late in the month? Do I wait for confirmation that the client is in compliance with child support before authorizing the payment? And the answer is no. We assume that the participant is in compliance through the end date of the IRP for both DWS and child support, unless you hear otherwise from one of your partners. So we handle that child support referral received late in the month, just like we would a DWS one. We assume compliance unless we hear otherwise. So you can go ahead and authorize that benefit. Question number 12 is about the new electronic 543. This is the new web-based child support application. It can be accessed either through the DFS main webpage or on the child support page. Please remember that the customer can choose either the paper 543 or the E43 online application. The important thing to remember, I think, is, you know, help your customers make that decision. If they're relatively computer literate, this might be a good option for them. If they don't have access to a computer or maybe a smartphone, then the paper application might be best for them. Do note the E543 application, the customer must save and submit. It does not store applications so that they can come back to them later and complete them. So it's important that the customer clicks on the save and submit. That will submit even if the application contains lots of blanks. As long as it has their contact information, child support can then reach out just as they would with a paper 543 application and help them complete that. I included Marianne's some snippets from her PowerPoint presentation on Good Cause. I'm not going to go over that because Marianne just did that recently, except for I did want to share with you on the Good Cause denial. If they've requested Good Cause to be exempt from child support and they've been denied, Marianne will send a notice from Epics for you. But she will also send an email to the worker and the supervisor. And the reason why that's so important is because the client really only has 3 days to meet with the worker per our policy and agree to cooperate with child support. And 3 days, of course, is not long enough for them to receive that Epics notice. So it's important for you all to reach out to that customer and let them know what the decision was on that Good Cause, so that if they do choose to come in and cooperate with child support, they can do that within the required time frames. Question number 14, we get this one a lot. If a participant receives a payment on their card, can the state office just pull the payment back off the card? And typically this is what the clients will ask us to do, but unfortunately we are not able to do that. Child support cannot authorize debits or auto withdrawals on the child support card. So the process is outlined on how to return a child support check, again on the child support page on our Department of Family Services webpage under the state disbursement unit. There's instructions down here for the field office how to do that. But basically, the local offices can accept any form of returned child support in the form of a personal check, a money order, or even cash. And then the local office uses that DFS 9123 form to send back to the child support disbursement unit. So all of that can be found on this webpage for your convenience. And then lastly, if you have any other child support questions, you can visit their child support page. There's lots of great information there, and they have a great customer service hotline. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Encourage you guys, if you have questions about child support, to reach out to either myself or your local child support partner, and they should be able to help you. Any questions?
I do have one for you, Georgia. Will the e-filing give them the fee exempt like the paper one if they are eligible for it?
Oh, that's a good question. You know what? I don't know the answer to that. So you're talking about the section on the back where they can check mark if they want to be exempt, I'm assuming?
So power recipients do not have to pay the application fee or the $25 per year servicing fee for child support.
Yes, and that's still the same. I don't know how that's denoted on their paper application. I can check on that and let you know. I'm assuming though, once we send our referral, that kind of triggers our child support partners to look for that specific individual and then know how to handle that situation. I'll double check on that. I think there's still some questions too out there about other parts and pieces of the E543. So as they become more familiar and more comfortable with their process and the new portal-based applications, I'm sure they'll have more information that they can share with us.
All right, sounds good.
All right,
that is
thanks
the
everyone.
Question that came through.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Georgia. All right. So moving right along on our agenda, we will jump into expenses. Let me get that up and shared with you. Okay, so we have our SNAP deductions. And SNAP deductions, as you know, are broken down into a couple different categories. And we'll start with looking at our shelter cost deductions. Shelter cost deductions can include things like rent or mortgage, including the second mortgage. Also, interest on the loan or mortgage payments. Property taxes, state and local assessments, mortgage insurance, and insurance on the structure itself. It is important that during the interview that we are asking questions about the property taxes and mortgage insurance and also the homeowner's insurance. We need to know if that is included in part of their regular mortgage payment, if their mortgage company has an escrow account and they've already annualized that cost and included it in their monthly mortgage payment, or if these are expenses that they have to pay separate from their monthly mortgage payment. So it's really important to conduct a very thorough interview and then also to relay that information into the narrative as you're documenting everything. All right, and of course, exclude insurance for furniture and personal belongings. We do not allow a shelter expense for rental insurance. It has to be the homeowner's insurance on the structure itself. When they do pay those expenses separate from their mortgage payment, we would take that cost and we would prorate that over the period of intent. An example of that would be if their yearly homeowner's insurance is $600 per year, we're going to take that $600, divide that over the 12 months because that is the cost for the full year. That would give us our monthly expense for that. And then we can also allow other continuing charges leading to the ownership of a shelter, such as repayments for a trailer, mobile home, or repayments on a reverse mortgage loan. All right. So shelter costs for the home, if it's temporarily not occupied by the assistance unit because of employment or training away from home, illness or abandonment caused by a natural disaster or casualty, can still be allowed when the assistance unit intends to return to that home. If there are current occupants of the home, they are not claiming the shelter costs. And the home is not being leased or rented during the absence of the assistance unit. So if they are away for training, say they live somewhere outside of Cheyenne and they have to go for training in Casper and it's going to be an extended stay for that work training, as long as they intend to return to the home and they're meeting these criteria, we can still allow that shelter cost as a deduction for their SNAP benefits. All right. We can also allow charges for the repair of the home that was substantially damaged or destroyed due to a natural disaster, such as fire or flood, unless it's reimbursed from another source. And that comes up quite a bit throughout the expenses. If an individual is receiving reimbursement from another source for an expense, it's no longer an out-of-pocket expense for them. So that reimbursement is something that we also need to ask about during the interview. We can allow condominium fees and service fees, not a late charge fee. And then the mortgage insurance. All right, utility deductions. This is why this is perfect at this time of year, because we are looking at things like LEAP and heat, and things change. Also, our SUA and telephone, all of those expense amounts do change every October. So our utility deductions are broken down into the standard utility allowance, or SUA, our utility only allowance, or UOA, the telephone only allowance, TOA, or the actual cost for one utility. We always want to start during the interview. We want to ask questions. What expenses do you pay? How do you heat your home? How do you cool your home in the summer? And all of those things. We want to try to give them the maximum benefit for their household size, which means we need to be looking at the maximum paying expense deductions as well. So you want to start with the standard utility allowance, see if they're eligible for that. If they are not eligible for that, if they do not pay for their heating or cooling, if they did not receive LEAP, then we'll move on down to the utility only allowance, because that's the next highest benefit to that assistance unit. So always want to start at the top and kind of work our way down. So the standard utility allowance, that does include gas, purchased wood, electric, coal, and air conditioning costs, or if the client has received LEAP in the most recent 12 months. For applicants that live in public housing, the SUA can be applied if they are billed for excess heating or cooling costs. So a lot of public housing, they receive a utility allowance. And so that utility allowance might be, we'll say $60 a month, just for an example. And so every month they're allowed $60 towards their heat, because it's all kind of charged with that public housing unit and not individual. But at the end of the year, if they are charged for the excess cost, or even monthly, if they're charged for anything that goes above and beyond that $60 utility allowance, even if it's $1, $5, whatever it is, they're still being charged for that heat. So we would allow them to receive the standard utility allowance. We can also allow it to assistance units who are in private rental housing, and they're billed on the basis of actual or flat rates separate from the rent. I do hear that instant message ding, but I'm going to get through this, and then we'll go ahead and answer questions at the end. So just be patient with me. So the SUA may be allowed to assistance units in private rental housing who are billed on the basis of actual use or flat rate separate from the rent. So if the heat is still in the landlord's name and the landlord says, well, your rent is $400 a month, and then you're also going to pay another $100 a month towards the gas bill for this apartment. If it's $100 every single month, as long as we verify that with the landlord, we have verification of that from him, we're able to document all of that within the narrative as well, we can allow that assistance unit to receive the SUA, because ultimately they are responsible for paying for that heat. Same thing, if the landlord, your rent's $400 a month, but every month I'm going to receive that gas bill for your apartment or your rental property, and I'll tell you exactly what the costs were, what's due this month, you have to pay that bill, as long as we have that all verified. So it requires that interview has to be thorough, really finding out what the circumstances are, and then also verifying that information. Written and signed statement from the landlord that also includes collateral contact information, so we can call them and say, you know, what is the deal with this? Make sure we have any conflicting information or questions answered, and then we're able to document that into the narrative really well. All right. If utility expenses are shared, the full SUA can be applied. If you have a landlord roommate situation and they are sharing the expenses, they're splitting them in half, each individual can receive the SUA, 2 separate assistance units, as long as we do have that also documented and narrated. Our current SUA, and this was just changed October, is $393. When you receive the SUA utility deduction, no other utility information can be used. So we're not going to also give them a telephone deduction at the same time. All right, standard utility allowance and LEAP. The SUA must be made available to households that receive a LEAP payment in the current or preceding 12 months, and that payment exceeds $20. All LEAP payments in Wyoming do exceed $20. And the LEAP payment is not contingent upon receipt at the household's current address. Even if they have moved from the address where they received a LEAP payment in the previous 12 months, even if they no longer pay for their heating or cooling in their current address, if they have received a LEAP payment in the previous 12 months, we will allow them to have the standard utility allowance. All right, so if they're not eligible for the standard utility allowance, you've talked about all of that during the interview. They do not pay heating and or cooling. They have not received LEAP in the previous 12 months. Then we move on down to the utility only allowance. That includes electricity and fuel for purposes other than heating or cooling, water, sewer, well, and septic tank installation and maintenance, telephone, and garbage and trash collection. They would need to pay for 2 of these, not including heating or cooling. Again, if the utility expenses are shared, if there's a roommate situation and they split these costs, the full utility only allowance should be applied to the applicant. Our current utility only allowance is $266, and no other utility information should be used. Again, we cannot combine this with another utility expense deduction. If they're not eligible for that, then we're going to talk to them about their telephone expense. It can be for conventional telephone or cell phone. It includes prepaid cell phones. And our current telephone only allowance is $53. So we would need to have a receipt, a bill from their phone service, or a receipt for purchasing minutes, something like that to verify the telephone only allowance. Again, when we give that telephone only allowance, no other utility information should be used. If they're not eligible for that, we're going to keep moving on down that line to the next utility deduction, which is actual cost for one utility expense. That would be one utility excluding telephone, might be garbage, might be sewer. In that case, we would allow the actual monthly billed amount and do not include past due amounts. So you really want to be very careful and pay attention to detail as you're looking at that bill to make sure that we're not just looking at the amount current due, we're making sure that that is the current month's charges and there are no past due charges included in that total. And no other utility information should be used. All right, so coding shelter deductions in EPICS, the SUA should never be prorated and must be coded next to an eligible assistance unit member. If you have an excluded person in that assistance unit and that bill is in their name, we want to make sure that we're putting that SUA next to somebody who is actually included in that assistance unit and receiving benefits, because EPICS does not prorate that. When it has been determined that an ineligible assistance unit member is billed and pays any other shelter expense, then the expense must be prorated by coding the expense next to the ineligible assistance unit member. So rent can go next to the ineligible person, and EPICS knows to prorate that and count a portion of that towards the remaining assistance unit members who are receiving benefits. The SUA is the only one that cannot be prorated and must be placed next to an eligible assistance unit member. If the telephone only allowance is given, use the code TL for conventional telephones and CP for cell phones. All right, so that is a quick reminder on our shelter expenses. We'll move right along to medical deductions. Medical deductions are only available to assistance units containing elderly or disabled individuals. So how do we define disabled and elderly? Well, I pulled this directly from the glossary within the manual. We have talked a lot lately about referencing our combined manual, having it up on your desk, making sure we're using that at all times. One of the fantastic tools within that manual is the glossary. Sometimes we need to know exactly what a specific term means in order to interpret that policy correctly. And so going to the glossary would be your first step in figuring that out. Within the glossary, disabled is defined as a condition that is considered to be permanent. For SNAP, it would be a person who is receiving SSI or Social Security disability payments. Disability retirement benefits from a government agency for a disability considered permanent under the Social Security Act. They can be receiving Veterans Administration disability benefits and paid to a veteran with a disability or considered in need of aid and attendance or permanently housebound. VA assistance to a surviving spouse of a veteran considered in need of aid and attendance or permanently housebound. VA assistance to a surviving child of a veteran, and the child is considered permanently incapable of self-support. It can be railroad retirement annuity payments to an individual who is also Medicare eligible, and interim assistance benefits pending receipt of SSI or disability-related Medicaid, and the assistance is based on disability or blindness criteria, at least as stringent as those used to determine disability under SSI. Elderly is defined as a person who is 60 years of age or older for SNAP purposes. So you have to keep that in mind as you're looking at the medical deductions. What deductions do we allow? Medical and dental care, including psychotherapy and rehabilitation, hospitalization or outpatient treatment, nursing care, home nursing care, prescription drugs, over-the-counter medications when approved, medical supplies, sick room or other equipment, including rentals, insurance policy premium, Medicare premiums that are not reimbursed or paid for by a third party. There's that reimbursement thing again. Dentures, hearing aids, prosthetics, purchase and care of specially trained service animals, prescription glasses and contacts. We're going to talk about the specially trained service animals here in just a second. Reasonable cost of transportation and lodging for medical treatment or services, cost of maintaining an assistant, medical alert systems, not including that basic phone charge, and then payment on loans and charge card. You'll see a few little asterisks there. So when we're looking at prescription drugs, over-the-counter medications when approved, that can include postage and or shipping charges if they're receiving those through the mail. For reasonable cost of transportation and lodging for medical treatment or services, the mileage reimbursement for medical treatment and services when using a privately owned vehicle should be calculated using our current state rate. It's the same state rate that we use for the child care travel deduction. All right, what do we not allow? Before we jump to that, excuse me, I want to go back to the specially trained service animals. We are talking about service animals who are trained to do something above and beyond what a normal pet would do. So, you know, we're not talking about a companion animal. It would be a seeing eye dog. So they're trained to do something special to assist this person with their elderly or disabled needs. So that will require a really good interview and some verification as well. So make sure that we're documenting that in the narrative what was entailed during that interview, what type of verification you accepted, what this animal does, and why it is an approved specially trained animal. All right, so what deductions are not allowable? Lump sum payments for medical insurance, death or dismemberment, or income maintenance such as disability insurance. We do not allow Medicare premium when the client is not responsible for payment of the premium, such as when the state pays that premium through the Qualified Medicare Beneficiary Program, Medicaid program. That's kind of like that reimbursement again. Somebody else is paying for that. It's no longer an out-of-pocket expense for them. We will not allow a computer purchased by a blind person for learning purposes or special diets, including herbal supplements. We will not allow any expense to be covered by a third party unless it becomes part of the deductible. We also will not allow past due expenses. We define past due as 30 days after the billing due date, which does not have payment arrangements. So they haven't set up payment arrangements on it. Or when waiting for verification 30 days after the receipt of that verification. All right. Also, we will not allow payment for services provided by a member of the assistance unit or interest payments. All right, so as we go through those expenses and we determine that this individual may be eligible for a medical expense deduction, what verifications do we need for our standard medical deduction? At the initial application, a client must verify that they have incurred more than $35, so it has to be $35.01 per month in qualifying medical expenses. Documentation should be included in the case file. At recertification, when we're talking about the standard medical deduction, the client must simply declare that they still have medical expenses in excess of $35. So they still have that $35.01 in medical expenses per month. At that point, no other verification is needed beyond that verbal verification. We do have to narrate that very well within our narrative. And it's important to note, and I don't know why it isn't there, but there cannot be a break in service. So it has to be a recertification. If benefits have closed and they reapply, we're back at that initial application stage. And so they will need to have to provide documentation all over again. All right. So how is the medical deduction calculated? If we go through all of the medical expenses and our individual receives $35 even or less, no deduction is entered into Epix. However, make sure that you narrate and that narrative does indicate that the client was asked about his or her medical deductions, what the client's response was, and why they are not eligible for a medical deduction. If the client has between $35.01 a month up to $138, then they would be eligible for the standard medical deduction. And on the DEMH screen, you're going to enter that ME 138. Epix will calculate the correct deduction for you. So what happens if you have someone who pays more than $138 a month in medical expenses? We can actually give them actual cost of their medical expenses as the deduction. So we would total up everything, go through their verification, through their prescription history, all of that stuff. We're going to total it all up. If it's more than $138, for example, it's $156 a month. Then on DEMH, we're going to put ME 156 and hard copy. So then Epix will calculate the correct deduction for them from that. All right, so how do we handle a one-time medical deduction? If it's an initial application, our client can choose to average the deduction over the entire certification period or be given a one-time deduction. This is one instance where I would recommend that during the interview, during this discussion, plug some numbers in and let them know how that's going to affect their benefits so they can make an informed decision on that. You know, if it's a large medical expense, we have a maximum SNAP benefit amount for their household size. So they might benefit from that large medical expense more by averaging it over the entire certification period and increasing their monthly benefit to more than what it was. If we do it as a 1-month expense deduction, they'll cap out at the maximum SNAP benefit allotment. So it might not change their benefit a whole lot. So you want to kind of crunch those numbers and let them know how it's going to affect them, and then help them to make an informed decision on how they want that expense to be counted towards their SNAP benefits. If the expense is reported during the certification period, so it's a reported change, the deduction can be averaged over the remainder of the certification period, or the client can be given a one-time deduction. Again, informed decision. Let them know, I received this change report. If I add this expense to just next month's benefit, this is what it will do to your benefit. If we average it over the remainder of your certification period, if they have 3 months left, and we divide that expense over the next 3 months, it will increase your benefit to this much for each of those months. How would you like me to handle this case? Let them help you to make that decision. If the expense is reported on the last or next to last month of a certification period, the deduction can be averaged over the new certification period. Again, as long as there's no break between certification periods. So if they are due to recertify in November or December, and we receive a change report saying that they had this large expense deduction, we could change it for the month of December only, or we could average it over their whole next certification period. Again, look at those numbers and let them help you make that decision. See what will benefit them the best. All right. Ensure that your applicant understands the deduction will not change during the certification period unless a change is reported and verification of that change is provided. And make sure to clearly narrate. Narrate, narrate, narrate. I cannot stress that enough. We really need to be documenting our conversations during the interview, what the client states, what verifications they provided, what our calculations are, and what the final determination on that is. All right, moving right along to dependent care deductions. We allow the monthly best estimate of out-of-pocket expenses for dependent care as follows: when necessary for an assistance unit member to accept or continue employment, to seek employment in compliance with job search criteria or an equivalent effort by those not subject to job search, to attend training or pursue education preparatory to employment. We do not allow any amount as a deduction from educational income. So if it's that reimbursement piece again, if we allowed it as a deduction from their countable educational income, then it wouldn't be allowed as a DEMH deduction as well. We can't use that same expense in 2 different ways. Do not allow a deduction for an amount that was previously exempted. And dependent care deduction can be used for children through the age of 18. And document in the case narrative the dependent care deduction was offered and the client chose to use or not use the deduction. One thing that I always think when I'm talking about deductions is these deductions are optional for our clients to claim. It's not optional for us as the worker to offer them. So if a client chooses not to claim a deduction, we need to make sure that we are narrating very well that we offered that deduction to them and that they chose not to claim it. If we just leave it blank and don't address that at all in the narrative, then it's questionable as to whether we offered it or not. And that can become problematic. So it's optional for them to claim. It's not optional for us to offer and discuss. And so we need to document that. All right. Do not use childcare contracts as verification of childcare expenses. And we've talked about that quite a bit recently. All right. So dependent care transportation. Allow the best estimate of mileage for out-of-pocket costs for transporting a child to and from childcare to be reimbursed at the current state rate. Client statement will be taken for the mileage from their home to the childcare facility and back home. If mileage does not look to be reasonable, you may use mapquest.com to determine the mileage. If a household has more than one child that go to the same child care facility, only one transportation deduction can be given. And if a household has two children that attend different child care facilities, a deduction can be given from home to the child care facility furthest from home. So we won't give them a deduction for both of that travel. We're just going to do from home to the furthest one. And document in the case narrative the mileage deduction was offered and the client chose to use or not use the deduction. All right, coding dependent care. Enter the correct coding on the EPICS DEMH screen next to the child that the deduction is for. We'll use the code CF for a child who is under 2 years of age and AC for a child who is 2 and over. For transportation, we enter the code CT on the EPICS DEMH screen next to each child that the transportation deduction is for. If it's for multiple children, the cost can be divided between them. All right. Child support deduction. Allow the legally obligated or court-ordered child support actually paid by an assistance unit member on behalf of a child to a non-assistance unit member. Allow child support, which may include legally obligated monetary payment and legally obligated arrearages being paid. Use a history of at least 3 months and average the payments to arrive at the child support deduction. Adjust for any anticipated changes which would affect the payment, such as a child turning 18. And establish a best estimate of anticipated payments when there is not a record of at least 3 months of legally obligated child support paid. Child support would be coded CH on the DEMH screen. All right, we're going to roll through some scenarios and kind of talk about some case scenarios here, which I think is very helpful as we're trying to put this information into practice. So scenario number 1, Lola Bunny has recently moved to Cheyenne from Laramie. In the apartment that she lives in, all utilities are included. Her rent comes to $750 per month. Currently, Lola's parents are paying the rent to her landlord, but Lola states that the money being paid is a loan and she will have to pay that back. After the interview, you discover that she had received LEAP at her former Laramie address in January of this year. So first question, is Lola entitled to the SUA deduction? Well, she isn't currently paying utilities. It's included in her rent. However, she did receive LEAP at her former Laramie address in January of this year. In other words, within the previous 12-month period. So because that LEAP payment is not contingent on current address, we will give her the standard utility allowance because she received a LEAP payment within the previous 12 months. So what other deductions is Lola eligible for? Is she eligible for rent? At this point in time, she's not paying her rent. Her parents are paying her rent for her. However, Lola states that it's a loan and that she will need to pay that back to her parents. Because of that, we can give her the rent deduction. However, we need a little more verification in this case. So we would need to verify with Lola's parents that they are currently loaning her the money and paying the rent for her and that she will need to pay that back to them. So we will need that verification from her parents. We'll need to make that collateral contact and clear up any confusing information and make sure that we document that all very well into our narrative. And then how should Lola's rent with included utilities be coded in EPICS? Refer to your combined manual codes, please. Make sure that the codes that we enter into EPICS are accurate. And so for that one, it would be RU because she's currently rent and utilities included. All right, scenario number 2. Granny Webster has applied for benefits. During her interview, she emphasizes that she's on a very fixed income and would like to get every deduction possible in order to maximize her SNAP benefits. Currently, she is paying her deductible for Medicare, but she tells you that she recently applied for some government program that will pay for that. When you contact the Department of Health, you find she has been approved for QMB at the beginning of the month and that she should start seeing that amount on her check in 2 months' time. Granny tells you that she has a cat, Sylvester, and a note from her therapist stating that Sylvester is a therapeutic presence and an instrumental part of Granny's emotional health. Granny has several receipts for food and care of Sylvester that come to an additional $56 per month. Granny also has a note from her doctor stating that she is currently taking several dietary supplements and vitamins that are important for her health. She provides receipts for these and they total $70 per month. And finally, Granny states that she makes one visit to her doctor each month. She thinks it's about a 150-mile round trip to the doctor's office. By looking at the address on the letter she already has given you, you are able to determine that her trip is 62 miles one way. So that's a lot of information to sort through, which is very often the case when we're looking at these types of assistance units and potential deductions. So it's important just to go through it piece by piece. So how much of a medical deduction is Granny entitled to? We're going to go through this piece by piece and determine if she's eligible for each of these deductions. Starting with her Medicare premium. She's been approved for QMB. They will start paying for that. She won't see that come out of her check in 2 months' time. Something that we know and that you need to discuss and narrate is she will be reimbursed for this 2 months. Even though it's going to continue coming out of next month's check and the one after that, she will receive a reimbursement for that. And we've mentioned reimbursements a few times here. Because of that reimbursement, and because she's approved for QMB, Granny is not eligible to use the Medicare premium towards her medical expense deduction. Looking at Sylvester the cat. He's a therapeutic presence and an instrumental part of Granny's emotional health. Is Sylvester trained to do anything above and beyond what a cat is trained to do? Does Sylvester fetch her medication? Is Sylvester her seeing eye cat? No. Sylvester has not been specially trained as a service animal, so we will not allow an expense deduction for Sylvester. Moving right along to the dietary supplements and vitamins that are important for her health. Are they intended to treat a specific ailment? Has a doctor prescribed these over-the-counter medications to treat a specific ailment for her? It doesn't sound like it. Of course, we would need to do a little more research than what we have here, but it doesn't sound like it. So we contact the doctor. No, they're not meant to treat any specific ailment. So because it's just generally good for her to do this, we're not going to allow that towards the medical expense deduction. Finally, Granny states that she makes one visit to the doctor each month. We're going to look at that mileage. We were able to determine with the addresses that it is 62 miles one way. Can Granny receive a medical expense deduction for that? She sure can. So we're going to do the 62 miles one way times 2 ways at 1 time a month at the current state mileage rate and come up with that total. If that total is more than $35.01, then Granny would be eligible for that standard medical deduction. So that's how we work through all of that. What information do we need to include in the case narrative? All of that. Everything we just discussed, everything we just went through, we need to make sure we make note of why she's not eligible to use the Medicare premium because she's receiving a reimbursement for that. Why Sylvester is not a service animal. You know, all of those things we need to make sure that we are clearly documenting that within the case narrative. All right, scenario number 3. Foghorn Leghorn is a devoted single father that has fallen on tough times. He has had to leave his longtime job and has found a job crowing at a large corporate farm. The only people that he can find to watch his 1-year-old daughter Chick are his parents who live 25 miles away from his home. Foghorn also has a son, Egghead, who attends preschool daycare each day. The facility is 30 miles away, but not in the same direction as Foghorn's parents. Annie shows that he pays $30 out of pocket per day to his daycare facility. Foghorn estimates that he has to drive roughly 50 miles total to drop both children off, then 25 miles back to his home. All right, one thing at a time again. All right, so we know that Foghorn is paying $30 out of pocket per day to his daycare facility. Can we allow that? We can. That's his out of pocket expense. So we will use that and we will calculate that for the actual dependent care deduction. We're going to put that deduction next to the child that attends the preschool daycare. So that's going to go next to Egghead, and we will code it appropriately, CT or AC, depending on Egghead's age. How many miles do we give the Foghorn? That's the one that's really kind of tricky in this one. So when we're looking at the child care transportation, how do we calculate the mileage? Remember that a few slides back, we stated if they go to 2 separate daycares or 2 separate facilities, which we've got Parents and Egghead's preschool daycare, we're going to give the deduction that is the mileage that is the furthest from home. So the parents are 25 miles away from home, but the preschool daycare facility that Egghead attends is 30 miles away. So it's the 30 miles that we're going to use to calculate that child care transportation. So it would be 30 miles times 2 ways times however many days a week that Egghead is attending that, times the current state rate, and that would calculate the total for our child care transportation costs. That would be coded as CT in Epics next to Egghead. All right, scenario number 4. This one's my favorite. Pepe Le Pew's years of chasing women has finally caught up to him. On his SNAP application, he lists that he is currently paying a substantial amount of child support. During the interview, Pepe tells you that he has to pay child support toward 3 different children, Fleur, Jacques, and Lisette, each with a different mother. His payment breakdown as follows. To the mother of Fleur, Pepe pays $200 per month. The money is deducted directly from his paycheck that Pepe provides, and he also has a divorce decree establishing the amount. Fleur will turn 18 in 2 months, and Pepe tells you that he won't have to pay after that. To the mother of Jacques, Pepe pays $150 per month, plus he's obligated to pay her $100 toward her rent. Pepe does this by check each month and shows the canceled checks on his bank statement. To the mother of Lisette, Pepe is ordered to pay $100 per month. However, Pepe is able to show you that he has been paying $200 per month out of the goodness of his heart. So how much of a deduction do we totally give him? So we look at each one. To Fleur, he pays $200 per month. That's what he's paying out. That's what he was established in his divorce decree. So we have a court order that he's to pay that $200 per month. So we can include that $200 towards his total child support deduction. However, she's turning 18, he won't have to pay after that. So we have to take that into consideration as we look at this case and throughout the certification period. To the mother of Jacques, Pepe pays $150 per month. Plus he is obligated to pay her $100 towards her rent. This is why this one is my favorite. So can we include that $100 towards rent in his child support deduction total? It is a monetary payment towards the rent, and it is court ordered. It says he's obligated. So it is a court order that he not only pays her $150 a month, but that he also pays that $100 monetary payment towards the rent. Because it is court ordered, we can include that into his child support deduction. To the mother of Lisette, Pepe is ordered to pay $100 per month. However, he pays $200 out of the goodness of his heart. Can we include that extra $100 that he's paying out of the goodness of his heart? Because that is not court ordered, we cannot. So our total child support deduction for him is $200 for Fleur, $250 for Jacques, and $100 for Lisette. So we are looking at $550. We know that Fleur is turning 18 in 2 months. So as we roll through this case, we would take that into account and change that deduction for the time when it's actually ended. All right, scenario number 5. Marvin the Martian is relocated to Wyoming. Upon applying for benefits, he lists on his application that he is paying $575 per month in rent. To verify this, he brings in a current lease agreement. In the lease, the breakdown of fees are as follows. Monthly apartment rent $475, late fee $50, and a set fee $50. Other monthly rent for the garage is $50. Total monthly rent $575. Security deposit $200 and pet fee $30. So how much of a rental deduction do we give him? He says he pays $575. The lease says the monthly apartment rent's $475. So we have a $100 difference, and we need to know what that difference is. Is it a late fee and an NSF fee? Or is he paying for a garage? Is he paying a little bit every month towards the security deposit? Like, did he not have that when he moved in and the landlord was willing to split it up over a few months and include that as part of his rent? Does the information that we have on this tell us the answer to any of those questions? It doesn't. So this scenario is an example of how we need to look at things. We can't just take his $575 per month statement and give him that deduction, because the verification that we have conflicts with that. We don't know what that extra $100 is for. We don't know if it's allowable. If it's late fee and NSF fee, it's not allowable. So then we can only give him $475. So what we need to do, what this example really is why it's so important to pick up the phone, contact the landlord, make the collateral contact, and find out exactly what that $100 difference is, and determine whether we're giving him a $475 deduction. We might be giving him, the full $575 if we have this verified and we know that that extra $100 is an allowable expense towards his rent. So pick up the phone, make the collateral contact, clear up any of that conflicting information, and then make sure that you document that in the narrative as well, and why you determined the final rental expense amount and what part of that was allowable. All right. So that is our expense deductions. I'm going to take a quick look here. What I may do, because I got quite a few questions during that as well. So what I may do is we'll take a look at those as soon as we're done, and I'll do an email out to everyone with the questions, the Q&A, just like we did with the last video conference. I think that that's probably the best way to go about getting those questions answered for you. So that being said, watch out for that email in your email today, and we will get all of those answered for you. All right. So moving right along, we're going to jump into our Power Assistance Unit and EPICS coding. As soon as I can get this one closed out and get that one pulled up. Okay, so the fun thing with this is the last Hit the Mark that went out, we had some assistance units examples for power that we used. So we got to talk and we were planning some power training and decided that it would really need to continue using those same assistance units in other parts of power training. So you're kind of following the same case in the different aspects of how you handle that case. So the assistance units in this training are the same assistance units that were in the previous Hit the Mark, which addressed assistance unit composition and power as well. So our first case, we're going to do a case scenario, and then we're going to roll through some of the screens and how you input that assistance unit into EPICS and how the different assistance unit compositions affect the things that you're going to code with in EPICS. So first one is Sarah Incredible. This was our excluded step parent assistance unit example in the Hit the Mark. So Sarah's applying for power. The assistance unit consists of Sarah, she's 41, her husband John, who is 40, and Sarah's daughter, Mary, who is 8. Sarah would like to include only herself and her daughter in the power case. So as we discussed during that Hit the Mark, we can exclude John from the case since he is not financially responsible for Mary. He must be coded in a way to prorate his income so that a portion counts for Sarah but not Mary. So our first screen is the SEPA screen, and we're going to code John ST for his participation code. That ST code will exclude John from the benefit. Marital status, we have Sarah is married. She is married to John. John is married, and Mary has never been married. This call-out box that you see here is an example of the different codes that you would use in that marital status if this were a different type of assistance unit. For theirs, married, married, never married. The screen can also address temporary absence when looking at power cases, and you can do a little more looking into that in Combined Manual section 609. All right, we're going to move on to the specified relative page, and this is just some explanation of that before we jump into that. So in EPICS, you can go to the number 2, display table values in our system selection. Table 14 will list deprivation codes. That lists all of the deprivation codes that are available for power. However, our most common ones are going to be DI for divorced, LW for looking for work, NM for never married, UN for an unemployed parent. If we have an intact family, you'll enter the IF deprivation code, meaning that there are no child support issues next to the children with no child support issues. So for Sarah Incredible, her specified relative deprivation page or SPRD page, we're going to code her as the specified relative. She's the PI. We will include the non-custodial parent's information next to Mary. So her father's name is Anthony, Supergirl. And then we'll have the DI deprivation code because they are divorced. Sarah has divorced Anthony. And then our hard copy verification codes. We'll jump into the Child Support Enforcement Agency screen. So the assigned to child support rights must go next to the parent. That ensures that all the data is picked up correctly for the federal partners. Some of our assigned codes would be, is the case assigned? Yes. Or EX for exempt. And then are they cooperating? CO for cooperating, GC if they have good cause for not cooperating, PD for pended for good cause decision, and RC for refuse to comply, which would cause a sanction. All right, liquid resources, because John is coded ST, he's excluded from the benefit, but that ST code on SEPA is going to alert EPICS to exclude, it will count all of the excluded step parent's assets towards the assistance unit. So it's going to prorate his income, but it's going to count all of his assets. So we still, during the interview, need to find out what his assets are. So we're going to include his checking account, and his vehicles, and that kind of stuff. We're going to input that information into EPICS. Same with the vehicles. We will still include that within the vehicles, because all of his assets are counted towards the assistance unit. And then this is just an example showing how that has been calculated. So because it's power, our 2 highest vehicles have been exempted. The lowest vehicle value has been counted. And it is counting all of the liquid resources. So it is, that ST code is working properly. It's counting John's assets towards the assistance unit. All right, when you're computing the step parent's income, that ST code on SEPA is going to prorate their income because he's not financially responsible for Mary, his stepchild, but he is financially responsible for Sarah, which means a portion of his income has to be counted towards Sarah because she's included in this assistance unit. I would recommend going to Combined Manual 1101. C to determine how to calculate that excluded step parent's income. Also, work with your supervisors. This is something that we don't do a lot, and so there are a few steps here for it. So reference the manual and work with your supervisor on calculating that income. All right, work registration, coding for WARWA. Make sure to get that done right away. That is essential for our program assessment, reporting, and auditing requirements. We'll code exempt applicants or recipients as Y and EX for exempt. We'll code mandatory applicants, meaning they have to be referred to workforce services for the work program, as N and NE for non-exempt, and then enter the appropriate code in the target field. Our target groups: CP for teen parent, CT for one parent in a 2-parent assistance unit, RA for adult claiming to be incapacitated, WA for adult claiming she or he is caring for an incapacitated immediate family member, YC for child not attending school, YF for adult or member in an assistance unit fleeing because of being battered, and NT for all other individuals. And we'll look at that here in just a sec. All right, so Sarah has to be referred to the work program. So she is not exempt from the work program. Not exempt is her code. John does not. He's not participating in that. So yes, he's exempt. Mary is a student. She's a minor child and a student. So yes, she is also exempt. So that's where that coding is. The target coding, NT, that identifies that the individuals in the target groups are part of the all other individuals group from the coding that we just discussed. All right, shelter expense. We're going to put those expenses in. They do pay rent and utilities. Their shelter supply code is going to be N for no. All right, so our next assistance unit scenario is the excluded SSI parent case. It was Jenny, she's 29. She's applying for power for herself and her daughter, Lily, who is 12. Since an individual cannot receive both SSI and power simultaneously, we have to exclude Jenny from the power grant by coding her SS on SEPA, but Lily would still be eligible for power. So the SEPA page is going to look like this. Jenny's coded SS, Lily is coded in. That SS code will exclude all of the SSI recipients' income and assets from the assistance unit. This is why it's so important to make sure that we have our coding correct, because each code really does tell EPICS to do something different. And that something different, if it's coded incorrectly, could cause an overpayment or an underpayment issue. So we want to make sure that we are double checking our codes within the manual and that we are putting the correct codes into EPICS. Marital status. Same codes that we talked about several slides before. Jenny is divorced. Lily has never been married. Specified relative deprivation page. Jenny is still our specified relative. We're going to put Lily's absent parent information here. The deprivation code for that is divorce. It might be never married if they had never been married. Whatever is appropriate for their assistance unit. All right, child support enforcement. Has a case been assigned? Yes, it has. Is Jenny cooperating with that? Yes, she is. So we have the cooperation code there. All of Jenny's income and assets are excluded from the case. So this is a child-only case. We need to know if Lily has any accounts. In this case, Lily does. She has a savings account, and there's $250 in there. So we verified that and put that into the system. Unearned income, Lily is receiving $100 in child support. Jenny has her SSI. Because she's coded SS on SEPA, EPICS knows to exclude that income. It's not going to count it against Lily. And we'll look at that page in just a sec to make sure that that is actually happening. But Lily's receiving $100 in child support. Work registration, same codes as in the previous case. Is Jenny required to go to Workforce Services? She's not. So yes, she's exempt from that and the exempt code. Is Lily exempt? She's a minor child who is attending school. Yes, she is exempt as well. And then the NT target code for all other individuals will be here for her, for both of them. All right, DEMH. Shelter supplied code for an SSI household is going to be S. That makes sure that they receive the lesser of the power grant. So make sure you're putting that S in there and then whatever their expenses are as well. All right. So because of the SI code on SEPA, even though we do have Jenny's income listed on the unearned income screen, because we've coded it correctly, EPICS knows to exclude that. So our countable income is only that $100 in child support for Lily. So this is just a way to look at this and double check to make sure you have everything coded correctly. and that EPICS is doing what it needs to do because of that coding. All right. So Lily's income is the only income being counted toward the grant calculation, just that $100 of countable income. All right, our next assistance unit comp example is an excluded illegal immigrant parent. How do we put that into EPICS? The case is for Marcus Aurelius. Marcus is 35. He's applying for power for himself, his wife, Maria, who is 34, and their son, Anthony, who is 8. Marcus and Maria are both illegal immigrants. Since illegal immigrants are not eligible to participate in power, Marcus and Maria will be coded DI on SEPA. This code will exclude Marcus and Maria from the power grant, but count all of their assets and a portion of their income toward Anthony. So you got to make sure that we have that code correct. So on SEPA, Marcus is DI, Maria is DI, Anthony is coded as in. All right, we've got the social SSDO screen's a little different for an illegal immigrant parent. Well, and for the two-parent household, this is what I really wanted to show you, is since it is a two-parent household, we have to put a Y under this two-parent column next to one of the adults. That helps to refer the correct people, if we need to workforce services. This is an illegal immigrant case, so they're not going to go to workforce services, but it's also a two-parent case. It was the only two-parent assistance unit that I had listed, so I wanted to show that to you. That you're going to put a Y under that two-parent column next to one of the adults. That does not necessarily mean an intact family. It's not the same thing as an intact family. It could be parent and step-parent, just that we have two adults that would both need to be referred to workforce services to make sure EPICS picks that up. All right, the HERC screen, want to make sure that we have all of this coded correctly for the illegal immigrant parents. We want to make sure that we have their heritage code is correct, ethnicity, residency. So we have Marcus is Hispanic. Yes, he's of Hispanic origin. Yes, he's a resident of Wyoming. Citizenship, IA for illegal alien. Hard copy, yes, we do have identification for them. Anthony is a US citizen and hard copy. So double check your coding for HERC as well. Marital status, same codes that we talked about in the very first scenario. So Marcus is married to Maria, Maria is married to Marcus, and Anthony has never been married. All right, another one here, because this is an intact family. On the SPRD or specified relative deprivation screen, you want to make sure that our deprivation code for Anthony is IF. That's intact family. There's no child support issue for him. So we don't have to put an absent parent here because he doesn't have an absent parent. It's an intact family. Child support, because it's an intact family, we have case assigned, EX for exempt. There are no child support issues for this case, and they're cooperating with that exemption. All right, so their DI coding, prorates income, counts all of their expenses. Yes, we still need to have Marcus and Maria's, I meant assets, sorry. Yes, we have to have Marcus and Maria's assets verified and in the case as well and entered into EPICS. So we have their home for other assets, their bank accounts, and their vehicles all listed. And when you look at the AFDC resource determination, even though because of that DI coding, EPICS knows how to treat their assets, and so it is counting their assets towards Anthony's asset limit for the power grant. Earned income, we're still going to verify their income and put that into EPICS as well because it will be prorated so that a portion of it counts towards Anthony. All right. Our target code on the WARWA screen changes a little. That CT code, when we went back and you have that page with all of the codes listed on the first scenario, the CT code indicates that this is one parent in a two-parent assistance unit. So if you have a two-parent assistance unit, one of the parents should be coded CT for the target code and the others are NT. We don't have to include their information on this page because they don't have to be referred to workforce services. As an SSI, or I mean an illegal parent illegal immigrant parent household, it's a child-only case, so they don't have to go to workforce services as long as Anthony is attending school. He is a minor child attending school, so yes, he is exempt from work registration and the work program. All right, shelter supplied, they pay rent and utilities. That shelter supplied code is going to be N for no, it's not supplied. That will allow them to receive the higher grant. All right, and this shows that the income from employment is countable to that household, prorated and countable, and what the power payment standard is. Okay, so those are the assistance units that we had from the Hit the Mark in assistance unit composition, determining who needs to be included in the assistance unit, who can be excluded in the assistance unit, and how that's treated. And then this took those same cases a little bit further into how do we put that into EPICS for those. Those are some of the situations that we come across the most often. There are other assistance unit scenarios that we see sometimes, things like a minor parent case. They happen so infrequently. I didn't want to spend a whole lot of time on those in this. The best course of action with that is if it does come up, to work with your supervisor or work with Georgia, myself, and we'll work through those cases together, because like Georgia said to me previously, they really are about 2% of the power caseload that we have for the entire state. So we don't want to spend too much time on that. What we really want to focus on is the things that we see most often, and kind of having a little more confidence in how we handle the power cases as we're seeing our power caseloads increase, and we're dealing with those a little more. I did hear a few dings as I was doing this, so we'll do the same thing with those. I will get those questions answered for you, and I will send an email out along with the SNAP, the expense deduction questions. We'll include all of that in the same email, so look forward to those coming to you here very shortly. We're a little over time. We had a pretty full agenda for you today, which is awesome. So I want to thank you for sticking it out with us. And I will let you go and move on with your afternoon. So thank you and have a great day.